games going on as we speak. The Primo rooting for some goals between Sporting Kansas City and Toluca tonight, if anybody at home was wondering.
You'll get goals there.
All right, I hope so. I mean, the Primo definitely
I was
hope
talking
so.
to the Primo.
Yes, of course. Thank you. He's a big fan of this show, big fan of yours as well. All right, so let's hit this from a Liga MX perspective first. Which was the bigger flop for you? Chivas going out in the group or Rayados going out in the group?
Rayados, the biggest flops in this one. And
look at you with your Tigres ways, your anti-Rayados ways. I don't disagree with you. I just love it.
No, and I say this respectfully, and I know the producer's not going to like what I'm going to say, but I say this respectfully. I don't expect anything out of Chivas. I understand that Chivas lost to the worst team in Major League Soccer, the San Jose Earthquakes. I understand. Well, they lost in penalty kicks. They tied the game and lost in penalty kicks. I understand that. I understand that Chivas lost in penalty kicks to a team in the LA Galaxy that was already qualified and sat out 7 starters. There were 7 changes. Among them, their starting 9 is injured, by the way, didn't play. It was Payne still playing as a 9. And their backup goalie was the guy who was playing. So John McCarthy wasn't starting. And the whole defensive line was different. I understand they lost in penalty because it must be embarrassing. I understand. But I don't expect anything out of Chivas because that's what Chivas has done throughout the years. The last 8-9 years, that's where they've been. The off final here or there once, but that's where they are. You expect a lot more out of Rayados because of how they spend, because of what they have in that deck. I mean, you look at these players that they have. It's the richest roster in Mexico, one of the richest rosters in Latin America. And that coach, you fired a coach that was historic, not only in Liga MX, but in your own club. He was the most successful manager in Rayados' history. Victor Manuel Vucetich got 40 points in a regular season, set a record, and then you fire him to bring in Tano Ortiz. Tano Ortiz, who had what? How many years of professional experience as a coach? How many? Now on his 3rd season, and it was Tano Ortiz gets to semifinals and loses. This Tano Ortiz can't even get to a semifinal in a tournament like League's Cup. Is in a group with Pumas, and Austin, and loses to an Austin team that, wow, congratulations, unbelievable. But they weren't lighting it up in Major League Soccer. Loses to Pumas in penales and penalty kicks, and guess who scores on you? The all-time leading goal scorer of Rayados' history, who Tano Ortiz pushed away, says, you're surplus, we don't want you. In embarrassing fashion, by the way, sent him to Pumas. So now, here you are, Rayados, a team that's had so much in terms of resources over the years and cannot win to save their life. I don't care what anybody tells us. We are used to seeing Chivas this way, and I say it respectfully. Rayados, for as much as they spend, for as many good players as they have, for as many changes as they make, losing this way, that's the biggest flop.
Yeah. Chivas did finish last in a group that features San Jose, and that is quite an achievement. But Rayados lost to Austin. I mean, that is truly something in 2024. So it has to be Rayados here, Herc. There are other embarrassments kind of about this. From a Chivas perspective, I don't know what's happening with Chicharito. This has almost turned into a circus. From a Rayados perspective, the question now has to be, and maybe it's changed since we went on the air, is Tano Ortiz going to keep his job? Because we have seen this club fire managers for what happens at the Club World Cup. Would they fire somebody for what happened here in the Leagues Cup? Because I would think for Rayados, this is a pretty big embarrassment. This tournament was, don't forget, somewhat set up for them this time around.
Very much set up, and I think the idea is Tano Ortiz should be counting his days as a Rayados manager because his time is almost up. Tato Noriega, our good friend, he was in the Monterrey airport. They asked him about it, and he wouldn't guarantee that Tano Ortiz would be the coach in the future, let alone this week. So keep your eyes out there. But this is Rayados and who they are under Tano Ortiz, under Victor Manuel Vucetich, under Javier Aguirre, with Tato Noriega, with Julio Davino. You change the dolls, you change the muñecos, and the outcome is the same. So I really don't know what to say. My Tigres background tells me it's good to see Rayados this way. I enjoy seeing them this way. But this is borderline embarrassing. The amount of money they spend and the results they don't get. They've not won a league title in what, 13, 14 years? You're talking about ridiculous lack of production for the amount of resources they give this team.
Plus epic choke jobs. I mean,
Yes.
you just score one penalty in a penalty shootout. That's borderline Cruz Azuleada right there for Rayados, huh?
Yeah.
To miss that many penalties?
Yeah,
Come on.
and if you're Brandon Vasquez, you got to snap out of this little rut you're in. He's
Not
not been
gonna last
doing well.
long.
He's been heavily criticized in the Monterrey press, the Mexican press. And listen, I've been there, and Brandon's got to be, if you're going to take a penalty kick, you got to smash that in there. None of this hopping and do this and that. You've got to help yourself get out of this situation. And Brandon's a big enough player. He's a good enough player that one goal is going to lead to more, but he's got to snap out of this, and he can only do it himself.
Herc, big picture, there's lots of complaints right now about Leagues Cup. What do you think is a bigger problem? The format, right? The bracket format, which I know you were very hot about in our production meeting, or some of the lackluster crowds that we've been seeing at the non-marquee games, because it is worth pointing out, the Chivas games are drawing well. Tigres and Inter Miami, as you might expect in Houston, drawing very well. But there's a lot of games that just don't seem to be generating in-person interest.
Yeah, listen, and that makes sense to me, right? I remember doing a Football Picante hit with Chelis, our good friend Chelis, and Jose Luis Sanchez Solá, and he was saying, like, and he said this respectfully to my Cincinnati fans before they were good, and the idea of Leagues Cup came up. Who's going to go want to see Puebla versus FC Cincinnati during the wooden spoon years? And he's right. There are some games, some markets that make total sense. There are others that don't. That's a reality of both leagues, and we're seeing that. So that to me isn't that big of an embarrassment. But, geez, the way you try to make things happen, whether you're Major League Soccer or Liga MX, and you get suits in a room and they think things are a good idea and let's put it into fruition, and they try to do it, it's just embarrassing. Let me give you some numbers really quick. TFC win their group, okay? They've got to go 1,500 miles to Miami to face Inter Miami, who got second place in their group. Austin FC win their group, and guess what? For beating a group with Pumas and Rayados, two very good Mexican teams, guess what your prize is? You're going to go face second place LAFC. Necaxa, who doesn't even have a home team or market, they're playing against random MLS teams. They beat up on the Seattle Sounders, and they win their group, and for that, guess what? They got to go to San Jose and play the worst team in Major League Soccer, who will be at home. The LA Galaxy go undefeated against San Jose and Chivas, and guess what? They're going to have to go up to Seattle on that turf and play Seattle, who got beat up by Necaxa. Portland win their group, only gave up one goal, by the way, dominated teams like León, and guess what? You're going to go play second place St. Louis. And finally, what I'm trying to get here is why? Because some suit in the room thought it'd be a great idea to reward 12 months ago instead of what you do in this group phase. Is that what we're doing? That's going to create excitement? That's going to create people talking? Come on.
My biggest complaint with the format is the amount of penalties. You just saw it in the highlight that we did. Every single game is ending on penalties, and these teams seem to feel very comfortable just going to penalties and flipping a coin, and you get 2 points for winning a penalty shootout. It's basically a victory. I feel like every other game is going to penalties, Herc. So that's not something that I want to see in a tournament. Certainly not a tournament that's trying to feel real and feel important. I don't know, but everything's being decided on penalties. It feels like a youth soccer tournament that's been rained out.
Ask Chivas how that worked out for them.
Look, as far as the crowds, I think it's bad outside of a few exceptions. And I think the best example of it, Herc, is Atlanta. I mean, you saw it in Atlanta. They had 2 home games. Actually, you know what? Atlanta should have been the biggest flop. I know we limited to Liga MX teams. They had 2 home games against DC United, who, as much as I would like to pretend, are not very good right now. And Santos, who, Herc, as much as you might like to pretend, are not very good right now. And Atlanta got eliminated. I mean, this is a team that used to pack 40, 50,000 in the stadiums. They're going out here in the group phase, Herc, and there was nobody in attendance at these games. At least maybe the box score said one story. The visual confirmation, the eyeball test, as you like to say, told us a very different story. And that to me is very problematic because this is a new competition, Herc. This isn't something that's going to last just based on the last 100 years of history. This isn't Champions League. This isn't the World Cup. This is something new. It needs interest. And when you see huge stadiums empty, where we have seen huge stadiums full before, the example of Atlanta United, it has to be a real concern for those who are organizing this tournament, I would think.
Yeah. it's a real concern for Leagues Cup, Major League Soccer, and Liga MX. I am absolutely sure of that. How can it not be? I'll give them until the knockout rounds to see if there's no interest. If there's no interest, then we got a real problem here. And I tell you what, if Liga MX teams are dropping off like flies before you get to those final rounds, this is the last tournament we're going to see of Leagues Cup. Because if you can't get both sets of teams to face each other, it to be a compelling argument for why we should keep having this, you're not going to have this. And as far as Atlanta United is concerned, like, wow. This was at one point the bar of Major League Soccer, and I say that respectfully. I say that respectfully to the LA Galaxies and those teams of the world for what they did when they came in with the crowds and what they've done and what the show they put on that turf. It's a shadow of themselves. And you once had promise that they could buy their way out of that. I think that time is over. I think those days of that big spending are over. And Garth Lagerwey, he's going to go about it a different way. It may be a more intelligent way, and like he did it with the Sounders, but that's splashing those dollars. I think those times are gone.
Yeah. If Atlanta's not careful, we're going to be studying them. Like right now, we're studying New York City FC, a team that had a great launch, a great start, and since has lost a lot of relevance in their market. I know Atlanta seemed untouchable at one point, but it certainly doesn't seem like that anymore. A reminder, the Eredivisie Herc is back this weekend. Can you believe it? Already over on ESPN Plus. Saturday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, we got Feyenoord with Santiago Jimenez, the defending Cup champions, taking on Willem II. I think that's how you say that. And then Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we got PSV with all the Americans taking on Valvik. Both those games on ESPN Plus.